History of Society, Part 3, Session 7. This week we will have a look at the effect that protection has on wages. The general contention is that when there is protection, wages are higher because there is no competition from foreign countries exporting goods into the local market, which are produced with low wages. It is contended that if this is allowed, the local wages would have to decline commensurately. Trade, as we have seen, is a mode of production, and tariffs, as we say, have a tendency to lessen the production of wealth. But protective tariffs tend to alter the distribution of wealth by imposing higher prices on some citizens and giving extra profits to others. These unusual profits is a strong motive for the lobby to continue the protective regime. In what way does protection positively affect wages? It is seen that the direct object and effect of tariffs is to raise the price of goods, but the working classes are not sellers of commodities. They are sellers of labor. Their wages are used to buy these commodities, so how can increased prices benefit them? Wages tend to a common level because of competition. This competition is not competition of the goods market, but of the labor market, and this is for all occupations. Let us imagine one country of comparatively high wages and another country of comparatively low wages in close proximity to each other. There is free passage of commodities between these two countries, but not free passage of human beings. Would the high wage country do all the importing and the low wage country do all the exporting? Would this continue until demand for labor so lessened in one country that wages would fall to the level of the other? This scenario would imply that goods are exported from one country and get nothing in return. Clearly, the one country would export no more than it got in return, and the other country would import no more than it gave a return for. There would be an exchange of each country's production. Commodities exchanged would be determined not by the difference in wages between the two countries, nor by the differences between the cost of production, but by the differences in each country in the comparative cost of producing different things. Trade would be to the mutual advantage of both countries, increasing the amount which each obtained, but would not lessen the demand for labor or have any effect on reducing wages. Let us now imagine the same two countries not permitting the passage of commodities across their boundaries, but permitting the passage of men. No goods produced by the lower paid labor of the one country would now be brought into the other. But would this prevent the reduction of wages? Not at all. Would employers in the higher wage country now be able to get workers to work for less? Would this lower wages? Absolutely. Henry George said in the 19th century America, what we may thus see by aid of the imagination accords with what we do see as a matter of fact. In spite of the high duties which shut out commodities on the pretense of protecting American labor, American workmen in all trades are being forced into combinations to protect themselves by checking the competition of the labor market. The American protective tariff on commodities raises the price of commodities. For what reason there is of wages has been accomplished by trade unions and the Knights of Labor. Break up these organizations, and what would the tariff do to prevent the forcing down of wages in all the now organized trades? Protection is not for the protection of the sellers of labor, but for the protection of the buyers of labor, not the sustaining of wages, but the sustaining of profits. The same lobby that expresses anxiety for the protection of labor wages by the raising of their commodity prices, notoriously buy labor as cheap as they can, and forcibly oppose trade union activities that are geared to raise wages. Two assumptions contend that protection raises wages, and these are: 1. Increased profits of business lead to increased wages, and 2. Increased wages in the protected industries leads to increased wages throughout the economy. Do larger profits lead to increased wages? No one believes that. Buyers of labor, like all purchases, pay not what they can, but only pay what they must. Employers never give the increase of their profit as a reason for raising the wages of their workmen, though they frequently assign decreased profits as a reason for reducing wages. But this is an excuse, not a reason. The true reason is that the dull times which diminish their profits increase the competition of workmen for employment. Such excuses are given only when employers feel that if they reduce wages, their employees will be compelled to submit to the reduction, since others will be glad to step in to their places. And where trade unions succeed in checking this competition, they are enabled to raise wages. Taken from Henry George, Protection or Free Trade. Protective tariffs increase the profits of business, but they do nothing to raise wages of workers. If per se there is an increase in any protected industry, this would be quickly negated by an inflow of labor from other occupations coming on to compete. This flow of labor would have the effect of discouraging those industries protected. The bounty received by the protected business were instead given directly to workers. This would again cause a flow and a flood of workers into these industries, which would render wages to the levels before the bounty was issued. This is how Henry George again describes how wage levels are set and how it may be raised. The general rate of wages in every country is manifestly determined by the rate in the occupations which require least special skill, and to which the man who has nothing but his labor can most easily resort. As they engage the greater body of labor, these occupations constitute the base of the industrial organization and are to other occupations what the oceans is to its base. The rate of wages in the higher occupations can be raised above the rate prevailing in the lower only as the higher occupations are shut off from the inflow of labor by their greatest risk or uncertainty, by their requirement of superior skill, education, or natural ability, or by restrictions such as those imposed by trade unions. To secure anything like a general rise of wages, or even to secure a rise of wages in any occupation upon ingress to which restrictions are not at the same time placed, it is necessary to raise wages in the lower and wider occupations. That is to say, to return to our former illustration, the level of the bays and harbors that open into it cannot be raised until the level of the oceans is raised, taken from Protection and Free Trade. Pause here for a while. are beginning to sufficiently show the futility and absurdity of protection. There is, however, the plea that since capital has been invested and industry organized on the basis of the policy of protection, that is that this it is claimed would be unjust and injurious to abolish protection. If it is contemplated at all, it should be slow and gradual. This plea for delay cannot be a bare examination. A vested right should not be acquired by a wrong privilege. This privilege has no other basis than legislative action and can at any time be removed by legislative action. This privilege, it may be alleged by some, should and can only be abolished if the recipient is bought out, and because this has been the status quo for many years before, he and his descendants have a right to it. This view goes counter to the self-evident doctrine that all men are endowed by their Creator with equal and inalienable rights, and that any law or institution that denies or impairs this natural equality may at any time be abolished. The abolition of protection, the protectionists predict, will have a disorganizing effect on trade and industry. If this is the case, then it is better for all certainty. The working classes and the change would be short and sharp. When this occurs, it is also temporarily thrown out of employment. In this short period of depression, the public purse can be called upon to relieve the distress, but not in a way to create a welfare state. That the affected industries would be suspended or shut down by the abolition of protection is a notion of that of the tail wagging the dog. Where are the goods to come from? Which are the how are they to be paid for? Since other countries cannot export their products to us without taking in imports from us, any corresponding increase in imports will demand the corresponding exports. So far, although we have presented arguments for the absurdity of protection and showed that, that its regime is inimical to the interests of society, there is something more to be said for the continuance of our examination because a lingering question remains, which is this. If the protective theory is really so incongruous with the nature of things and so inconsistent with itself, how is it that after so many years of discussion, it still obtains such wide and strong support? So far, we have suggested that it is the tendency of free trade to increase production of wealth and thus permit the increase in wages, and that it is the tendency of protection to decrease the production of wealth and encourage monopolies. These do not follow from the abolition of protection. These do not follow that the abolition of protection will improve the working class. The tendency of anything that increases the productive power of labor will increase wages. But wages will not increase in conditions where laborers are forced into competition to offer their services for a mere living. As we saw last term, when land is all enclosed, this becomes the situation. Enough to say that free trade will increase wealth and reducing the cost of commodities is not enough. The working man has seen wealth enormously increased without himself feeling a share of this. Commodity prices have reduced, with them finding it easier to live. The whole question of free trade or tariffs is one of no real practical concern to the working man, because either regime does not really change his circumstance. It is plainly evident that the increase in wealth and the power to produce wealth has disproportionately benefited the working class and in fact intensified the struggle to live. Herein lies the explanation for the weaknesses of the free trade argument. It is useless to tell the working man that in increase in general wealth means improvement in their condition. They know by experience that this is not true. Next sessions, we will be devoting our time to see what true free trade constitutes and how it can benefit the working class. Next week, we will continue to discuss our discussion on free trade. Before we end, I would like to let all attendees know that Unsustainable Development is an educational offering devoted to the dissemination of its cause to all of mankind and to those who have the English language as their official language in the first instance, and to all eventually all over the world. To make this possible, and because we do not charge a fee for this dissemination, we rely wholeheartedly on monetary donations to meet the cost of achieving these goals. If you have found these sessions useful thus far and would like others to have access to them, we would gratefully accept your donations should you be inclined to offer them. You can send donations to our PayPal account at the address notebroker2001@yahoo.com. Thank you for your kind gesture. As indicated before, you can communicate with us by going to our Facebook page on Sustainable Development or our YouTube channel, Balancing the Economy. We will respond to all your comments or questions. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the alert button to get notices that our latest session has been posted. All sessions are archived at our Facebook page. Please share with your family, friends, and acquaintances.